The first sign something was wrong was that Tuesday refused to end. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean it was 11 to 87 p.m. My phone said so, and the sun was setting for the third time. I was 22, recently unemployed, and temporarily living back in my hometown, a place so forgettable that most people drove through it without realizing they had. The town motto was literally a nice place to stop. Nobody ever stayed on purpose. I noticed the time problem while working my shift at the public library, which was empty except for me, the janitor, and a man who had been standing in the history aisle, reading the same page for 4 hours straight. When I finally walked over and asked if he needed help, he looked up and said, "You early?" I told him it was Tuesday. He just smiled and said, "Exactly, at first, the loop was subtle." The mail carrier walked by twice within 10 minutes. The radio played the same song over and over, but it got a little bit faster each time. A woman came in asking for directions, left, and then came back 5 minutes later and asked the exact same question, only this time she was crying. I checked the calendar on my desk to Tuesday. Always Tuesday. The man from the history aisle closed his book and finally introduced himself as Harold. He said he'd been waiting for me to notice. Most people don't, he said, with this unnervingly calm expression. They just adjust. That sentence should have scared me more than it did. By Wednesday, which technically never arrived, the town was split in two. Half the people were visibly stressed, walking around with wide, panicked eyes. The other half acted like absolutely nothing was wrong. Businesses stayed open way past their closing times. The local diner was serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner all at the same time. The mayor held a press conference that kept looping mid-sentence. He did get to the part about municipal funding, and then poof, he'd be back at the beginning, clearing his throat. And then the sirens started. The sirens weren't for an emergency, not in the usual sense. They were a signal. They went off every single time someone tried to leave town. Not loud and dramatic, just a low, annoying whine that got under your skin. Anyone who ignored the sound found themselves right back on Main Street, no matter which direction they drove. I tried it myself. I got in my car, floored it down the highway, and ended up parked right in front of my own house with no memory of how I got there. Harold explained it to me like this: the town doesn't like being abandoned. Apparently, years ago, a big factory shut down. A ton of people left. The town shrank and shrank. Then one day, it just stopped letting people leave. The town responded the only way it knew how, by pretending everything was fine, by forcing things to stay the same. I asked him why I could see it, why I wasn't just adjusting like everyone else. He said, "You read the old newspapers," and he was right. I did, obsessively. I loved knowing what used to be here, the history of the place. Apparently, that little bit of curiosity was enough to break the illusion. That's when things got really weird. It turned out the mayor wasn't actually in charge. He was just a spokesperson. The real decisions were made during something called maintenance hours, which nobody ever remembered attending, but everyone somehow voted in unanimously. I found this out after I asked too many questions at the diner. Suddenly, I was being escorted to a chamber underneath the courthouse. It had no windows. The doors kept moving. The whole room was just filled with filing cabinets, labeled with years that hadn't even happened yet. 2045. 27/7 and then a voice spoke. It wasn't one voice. It was collective, layered, like 100 familiar voices speaking at once. It told me the town was tired. Tired of being forgotten, it said. Tired of being passed through. Tired of Tuesdays. They told me they needed a caretaker. I said no. The lights flickered violently. And that's when Harold dropped the biggest bombshell. This wasn't the first time I'd lived here. I had left town once before. At 18, I went to college, lived a whole life somewhere else. But when the town started collapsing in on itself, when the days began to overlap and memories blurred, it pulled me back. Quietly, cleanly. It edited my past. The version of me that left still existed somewhere else, moving forward. This version of me, the one standing in the basement of the courthouse, was the patch. A backup copy. I went to the library basement and found my old journals. There were pages I didn't remember writing. Promises I didn't remember making. In my own handwriting, it said, if it starts to fold, I'll come back. Just until it stabilizes, I just stood there and cried. The town dimmed the lights around me, in what I can only assume was a bizarre attempt at sympathy. With that secret out, Harold finally admitted what he was. He wasn't a person, not really. He was a placeholder, a role. Every caretaker before me had a guy just like him, someone who remembered what the town forced everyone else to forget. When a caretaker left, or broke, or disappeared, the town just created a new guide. He showed me a wall with dozens of names, all of them crossed out. His job, he told me, was to make sure I didn't panic long enough for the town to decide if I was a permanent solution. That was not comforting at all. I realized the only way to fix things, to stop this endless Tuesday, was to break the town. Not by abandoning it, but by letting it experience loss again. Something had to truly end. The town, this living, breathing entity, fought back. Streetlights went out wherever I walked. Buildings would shift their foundations. A rainstorm started that followed me indoors, soaking the library carpet. But I realized the town wasn't evil. It was just afraid. So I did the one thing it couldn't do for itself. I closed the library. Permanently. I locked the doors, boxed up all the books, and arranged for them to be donated. I let all that contained knowledge scatter. The town physically shook. Tuesday finally cracked. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Wednesday arrived late, angry, but it was here. The next morning, people started leaving. Cars crossed the town line without a single siren. Buses showed up at the depot. People I'd known my whole life hugged me, thanked me, promised they would write. Harold stood off to the side, smiling sadly. And then it was my turn. But my bags wouldn't stay packed. I'd fill a suitcase, and 5 minutes later it would be empty, the clothes back in my closet. Roads curved away from me. Every single attempt to leave just looped me right back to the courthouse steps. The town needs one witness, Harold said, his form starting to fade. Someone to remember what it was, and then he was gone. I was completely alone. Over time, the town began to disappear. Buildings vanished into mist. Streets shortened, folding in on themselves. Eventually, there was just my house, the courthouse, and a single road that led nowhere. Time moved normally again, but only for me. Years passed. I grew older. And then one day, I just woke up somewhere else. A bustling city. All noise and movement. I found a new library card in my wallet and a strange scar on my hand, perfectly shaped like the old town's map, and sometimes, when it's really quiet at night, I swear I can hear sirens in the distance, not to stop me anymore, just to say hello, thanks for listening. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe for more.